Canada's ambassador to China met with cabinet ministers and then later MPs on Parliament Hill to brief them on negotiations with the Chinese to try to free the detained Canadians. Joining me now to talk about that, someone who was in the closed-door briefing that media weren't allowed into, Conservative Foreign Affairs critic Erin O'Toole. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You had a chance to listen to this briefing. Were you satisfied with what you heard from Ambassador McCallum?
No. In fact, what was clear is that there has not been a plan with respect to this dispute, with respect to at least 3, maybe far more Canadians that have been dragged into the dispute with China. No plan at the beginning, no plan now, and not even a real sense of how many Canadians have been affected. We didn't get clear answers at any stage, and that should trouble Canadians because there's thousands of people working, hundreds of thousands living indirectly, and not even a real sense on the impact to those citizens. So I think the government needs to show some leadership. The Prime Minister seems to be waiting for this diplomatic dispute to go away before he gets involved. He needs to show some leadership and call President Xi.
Well, and they had indicated before they thought that might actually make it worse, that it would escalate it. Do you think it's just now at the point where that's no longer a risk, or did you not believe that in the first place when they said it?
Well, look, this is a very unusual case. Before the extradition, the Prime Minister was advised about the arrest. That's not normal. Why was that? Because they knew it would be very sensitive given the state-owned enterprise of Huawei. Huawei's been very political. What was the plan as a result of that? We got a sense today from Ambassador McCallum. There was no plan. He's a former Liberal minister, so he was trying to say what a good job Justin Trudeau and his team are doing. Justin Trudeau's calling every other world leader but the one that holds the keys to the prisons that Canadians are in. He's waiting for a photo op rather than leading towards a resolution.
Is there anything realistically that the Canadian government can do, though? I mean, we're a fly in China's ointment, as it were. We don't have the kind of oomph that the United States does, or even other countries around the Pacific Rim in some cases. So no matter what strategy there is China going to listen?
Absolutely, they will. There's a lot of trade and interest both ways. Canada is also a respected and linchpin player in the G7, in NATO, certainly very close with the United States. We have influence far above our size, and that's why China has tried for 20 years to improve relationships. But China respects strength. You know, under the Conservative Prime Minister, Harper was able to disagree strongly with China, but do it as a peer-to-peer relationship. Now the Prime Minister is willing to call President Trump to talk about the detention of a Chinese citizen, but he won't call the Chinese president to talk about detentions of Canadians. That should concern all Canadians, especially the families impacted.
Do you think that, based on what you're hearing, China thinks that Canada is weak?
Absolutely. The fact that the Prime Minister was advised about this situation before it even happened, which is highly unusual. How has he tried to calm the waters, particularly once they saw that Canadians were being arrested, criminal sentences were being changed in retaliation? He won't even acknowledge that it was retaliation, even though they're trying to line up other countries to be on our so-called side. He needs to lead that side. He needs to call the president, the Chinese president, as a peer and say, we expect fair treatment for our Canadians. We need to dial back the rhetoric. Some of it has been ridiculous. He seems to be waiting for this to go away. We're pushing for him to take some leadership.
Realistically, what can Canada do that will register with China and might help to free these Canadians?
Well, the best news actually came from the father of Ms. Meng Zhou, who said, the founder of Huawei said, thank you to the Canadians who've treated her well. The Prime Minister actually could have reached out very quickly and said to the Chinese president, Canada's justice system's the best in the world. Under our Extradition Act, she will get not only fair but quick treatment. In fact, she is living in a multi-million-dollar home in Vancouver on bail, while Canada's getting bare bones minimal consular access, brief minutes per month with our own citizens. So the Prime Minister should have fought for that right out of the gate. This was blowing up in December. It's still getting out of hand now. They're not even sure how many citizens are impacted. What's the Prime Minister waiting for?
But if the Chinese are determined to make an example of Canada, how do you get around that?
You don't let it happen. Certainly, this is at its heart Huawei. We've been calling for some time for Canada to be clear, like our other allies have in the Five Eyes. Huawei should not be part of our 5G network.
So why didn't your government say no to it?
It wasn't at the point that the 5G infrastructure network was being contemplated. Certainly, we expressed concerns with Chinese espionage, cybersecurity issues. This is always something we dealt with directly. In fact, in McCallum's departure speech from the House of Commons, he said prime ministers always dealt frankly with Chinese leaderships. Well, it doesn't seem like Justin Trudeau does. He won't even pick up the phone to call.
What did you make of the Chinese ambassador's threats this week to Ottawa, saying do what we want or face repercussions? What could those repercussions be?
I think with hundreds of thousands of Canadians, there's 300,000 that live in Hong Kong. I have family in Hong Kong myself. Threats like that are making the situation worse. It took until just last week for the Chinese ambassador to be summoned by the government about this dispute. His language since then has been inappropriate. He backpedaled a little bit.
Should we expel the ambassador? Is it time to start taking some tough steps?
I think he needs to be recalled again. Perhaps he needs to go to Vancouver and see how his citizen is being treated, and then give us assurances that our citizens will be afforded the same rule of law privileges that we're giving their citizen. I think they need an education on our system, and that's where the minister and the prime minister should do it.
Is it time, though, to perhaps say the free trade deal is off the table, or we're going to consider tariffs, to really take a hard line against China?
Well, we've said for some time that there should be no free trade agreement with China. The trouble is Prime Minister Trudeau made it the centerpiece of his time as Prime Minister, his 4 years as Prime Minister, we hope. There's going to be no free trade agreement as China is getting more aggressive, not respecting the rights of our citizens. I think this can be dialed back, but it's going to take leadership. This isn't going to naturally happen.
We have to wrap it up there, but certainly we'll keep an eye on it. Erin O'Toole, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.